We are studying Sri Aurobindo's commentary on the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, and in particular the first verse, where the whole cosmos is imaged as a horse, Ashwamedha. It is the cosmic horse, and the image is of a gigantic power in a high speed of movement. At this point, for the full appreciation, for the intuitive sense of the whole experience, the specific form and picture of the horse is not so important, but the spirit and the experience of the horseness, the dynamism, the power, the speed, the energy. It is this which we feel. But the verse itself then goes on to describe part by part the horse. And in all, there are 25 parts which are described. The number is significant because in the Sankhya system, the whole universe is described as being made of 25 essential elements. So, as the description proceeds, we find it goes from the most essential for manifestation, and therefore the most abstract, to the most specific and the most detailed for form. From abstraction to form, from essentiality to specificity. The narration proceeds in 25 steps. It's as if the verse describes this gigantic pouring energy in speed, moving from essentiality of the highest spirit into matter and taking form and materializing itself as the whole universe. The sequence is extremely important because it's following this process step by step of manifestation. But also, we find there are, as it uses the symbol of the horse, there are further subdivisions, natural rhythms to the whole process. So far, we have looked at what could be described as the most essential. And then, the last time, we moved to something which transitions to form. And subsequently, we will be taking up the portion which deals with specifics of form. So we could broadly describe this whole process of moving into manifestation in 3 phases. We have read the first verse many times, but now we reread with this idea. So first, the Rishi starts with Om. And we have seen that Om is not merely this sound, not only a creative vibration, it represents through A, U, Ma and the silence, the totality of Brahman in his 4 gradations: overt objective manifestation, inner subjective domains, essential causal consciousness, and then the transcendence, Ma, and drifting into the silence. So when he invokes Om, we are first given this massive experience, vision of Brahman in his totality. But this Brahman is also moving from his transcendence into spirit towards manifestation. And then dawn is the head of the horse sacrificial. Ushava ashvasya medhyasya shirah. And we saw why the frontal edge on the verge of manifestation of the essential being. Ashva is that being. Usha, dawn, is the movement to manifest on the edge, on the brink of satisfaction, but then the satisfaction is caused by the sun is his eye, his breath is the wind, his wide open mouth is fire, the master might universal. So on the brink of satisfaction, that power as it moves sees what it wants to be. And therefore the sun as the eye, and then energizes what it sees. And therefore the breath is the wind, and then casts into form what has been energized, and fire as the creative principle, the universal Vaishvanara. And so we have, at this point, the first phase of the whole movement to manifest. Until this point, nothing has been cast into specific form. There is only the movement to manifest, and at the last step, the manifestation has the capacity to cast itself into form by the power of Agni. But where will that form appear? In order for form to exist, there has to be the medium in which the form appears. This medium, the canvas on which the form has to manifest, is created by the sense of space. But this manifestation is a progressive manifestation. It is not frozen photograph or painting. And so there is the time. And the medium, therefore, is space and time. And it is now the second step, the second phase, casting the medium and the rhythm of the medium in which the forms will appear, using the rhythms of the medium. And that's the description which we read last time as preparation. And today we will review that also, but from a still deeper sense. And the text goes thus: time is the self of the horse, sacrificial. Heaven is his back, and the mid-world his belly. Earth is his footing. The regions are his flanks, and the lesser regions their ribs. The seasons his members. The months and the half-months are their joints. The days and nights are his standing place. The stars his bones. The sky is the flesh of his body. So this is the second phase of the description, where space, time, and the specifics of the rhythm of time in space have been described. And at this point, we have the canvas set, and with the canvas, the means of manifestation to be able to create a specific form in a specific place at a specific time, and their whole interplay of relationships in space and time, all of that is now possible. So this is the second phase of the manifestation. The third phase, which we will only read now to complete this description, which we will take up in detail later. The third phase now gets to the specifics of form in space and time, and this is described in terms of the internals of the horse. So far you saw the whole description is more what you see of the horse. We would even describe it as the externals, the bare structures. Now what happens inside the horse which makes the horse living? And so this inside is now described, and the life movements of its activity. The strands are the food in his belly. The rivers are his veins. His liver and his lungs are the mountains. Herbs and plants are his hairs. The rising is his front, and the setting his hinder portion. When he stretches himself, then it lightens. When he shakes his frame, then it thunders. When he urines, it rains. Speech, verily, is the sound of him. Now, all of these are the specifics of manifestation, and Sri Aurobindo will give us the deeper sense of each of these later on. So we see now three phases. The first phase, where this unmanifest tremendous power moves to manifest, and the means of its manifestation are described. The second phase, where the canvas and the method of formation is described. And the third phase, the specifics of the forms and their interdependence for sustenance and manifestation of life, is described. In all, 25 steps. Interestingly, we see also in these three phases, now corresponding to the form of the cosmic horse, just the frontal portion, the edge, the head, eyes, breath, and mouth in the first phase. Then the whole description of the structure from outside and the frame of support of the horse outside in the second phase. And in the third phase, the inside, the details of the internal organs and their relationships and processes. All of which we will see later intimately connected with a very profound logic, not only in the way the cosmos manifests and takes form, but also how it matches perfectly with the biological organization of the horse and the parts described. But interestingly, our experience of the cosmos is the very opposite. What is described here as the outside of the horse is for us the inner domain. What is described here as the inside of the horse's working is for us the external domain. We see, what do we see when we look at the universe? We see the rivers, the mountains, the herbs and plants, the lightning, the thunder, the sounds, vibrations. These are what to us are the appearance and the reality. But in the way it is described here, these are hidden inside the horse. They are the things which are the most specific detail of the working of form. What is it that upholds all that working? It is the self, the heaven, the midworld, the belly, the footing, the flanks, the ribs, the members, the joints, the standing place, the bones, the flesh. This is the basic framework in which all these specifics can take place. And at that point, we realize that the Rishi is seeing reality top down. We are seeing reality bottom up. So we see the most obvious formation of matter and say, this is real, that is vague, unreal, some subtle world somewhere. But this could not be unless there was that huge background of the subtle worlds and their canvas in which, on which, by which all of this experience can take place. This is the densification of something which is existent much more subtly, but therefore also much more profoundly, much more important. It's the framework in which the universe can unfold. So that is the outside of the horse. So as the Rishi sees the horse, he sees outside in, which is top down, and we see inside out, which is bottom up. And it's important to keep that distinction in mind. But what about the first part where he describes the head of the horse? That is the highest domain, where the transition takes place from the unmanifest entering into manifestation. So broadly, these three stages of the description correspond to the three levels of the Brahman moving into manifestation. So you see how Om, which describes Brahman in all of these levels, unfolds itself in these three phases as the verse proceeds. From the highest, most abstract, unmanifest, entering into manifestation, setting up the framework to materialize, and then entering the materialized forms. So this was the large picture which now we are able to look at based on the study that we have been doing so far, and also to be able to appreciate. In the portion we read last time, Sri Aurobindo dwelt on particularly this relationship between the description of space and time. Time is the self of the horse sacrificial, the self, Atman, as essential substance of consciousness. But this time, Sri Aurobindo explained, is not Kala, not time in its essentiality as an abstraction, but Samvatsara, time in its periods determined by movement in space. And we dwelt upon this extensively last time to see how time for us is known in terms of movement. And it is that which concretizes the objective experience of time. We saw last time, we spoke of the subjective experience. The time we have when we daydream is different from the time we share in the material space. And this is measured by the rhythms, movements in space. So the time as the self of the horse sacrificial is time moving to manifest into space, and the two are intimately connected. We can even say here, it is time which manifests as form of space. On the other hand, we can say it is space which is the expression of time. And therefore, between the two, we are led to conclude that time is the greater, more profound truth. And you will recall in all of the traditional descriptions, this importance given, it is mapped as the Lord Himself becoming time. In the Bhagavad Gita, you will see Kalosmi. He says, I am time. He doesn't say I am time, space. He doesn't say I am the space in which things happen. I am time first. I devour everything. I create everything. The Lord is described as Mahakala, and His power Kali. But the idea here is the creative power is first time. Time is the self of the horse sacrificial. But as this creative power moves to manifest itself, it creates these rhythms, and through the rhythms we have the experience of the space unfolding. And the description now moves to the space immediately after, linking the two and suggesting that it is time which flows to space and forms the space for its manifestation. Immediately after, the scope of the space is defined. Heaven, midworld, and earth. Dyauha, Antariksha, Prithvi. And so, the space is not merely the physical space, but across the planes of the cosmos, from the domains of pure mind, through the domains of life force and prana, into the most material, dense matter. Now we will ask ourselves, what are those? Where are those? How do they relate to us? To the Vedic Rishi, as Sri Aurobindo explained earlier, the three are continuous. Not only they are continuous, they are coterminous. They are simultaneously present right here as different gradations of the world. And each is deeply interconnected with the others. So when we speak of matter, you pick up a stone, we may see only the materiality of the stone. We do not see the life energy which is whirling the atoms, holding together by the power of forces, this tremendous energy which is thriving, throbbing, intensely active. And if for a moment the energy stops moving, the stone will lapse into non-existence. We do not see behind the energy the concept of stone, the mental formation which holds it together and binds the energy and makes it move in those rhythms, by those grooves, according to those what we call laws of physics, which are nothing but mental conception holding and guiding the energy. In the modern exploration of matter, if you were to take a tiny cube of steel and measure the forces involved which push the atoms apart or pull the atoms together and hold them, just the totality of the forces would be the equivalent of the weight of a gigantic cube of steel the size 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer. Imagine a cube of steel so big, the weight of that's the force which holds together this tiny 1 centimeter cube at an atomic level. That's the kind of power and energy which is held, which if released would destroy the whole earth in a single explosion and in a flash. And what holds that energy together? The will casting that energy in that form. And where is that will? Formative, creative, seeing, holding the idea? Right here. Where is the energy? Right here. Where is the form of the matter? Right here. But they belong already to 3 different gradations of 3 worlds. So in the Vedic vision, these 3 worlds are right here, interspersed, each influencing the other, and the most dense outcome is this materiality of what we see, but it is those higher levels which are really the base from which this appears. Still, the sense of space now is at a cosmic level, including all 3 domains. Each of these domains has its own peoples, has its own laws, has its own processes, and beautiful sceneries and landscapes of their own, in their own substance, of their own nature. All of these are included in this. So time is the self of the horse sacrificial, but from this self now the movement into form in space. Heaven is his back, mid-world his belly, earth is his footing. And we will see later further how these 3 become represented in the specifics when we describe the food in the belly, the rivers as the veins, livers and lungs as mountains, etc. We'll see they actually correspond to these 3 later. Then, once we have this large sense of space, the specifics of space. The space here is still too general, all-inclusive, too universal. From there it must move to specific of form and rhythm of movement of time in that form. So you'll see step by step there is this narrowing. The regions are his flanks. The word used, Dishaha, Parshve. Disha, you will recall, these are the 4 directions. These are the flanks of the horse, that is the 2 sides. We will see why shortly. And then the lesser regions, these are the Parshava. These are the ribs. The seasons are his members, the limbs. The months and half months are the joints. The days and nights are his standing place. So you find how bit by bit there is the narrowing. And then, what makes him the substance of the horse? Bone and flesh. Remember, flesh is plastic, we touched upon this last time. Bone is rigid, supporting the flesh. So, the stars his bones and the sky is the flesh of his body. So there is first from the self of the horse as time, the 3 regions, and then the specifics of the rhythms of time, and again concluding with bone and flesh, which again suggests the sense of space. So time unfolding in rhythms, ending up in the tissue and bone of the canvas in which the manifestation is going to take place. So Sri Aurobindo in his commentary, which we have read last time, describes this flesh and bone connection where he says the sky, nabhas, the ether above us, in which the stellar systems are placed. And these stellar systems themselves, concentrations of ether, are the bones which support the flesh, and of which life in this spatial infinity takes advantage in order more firmly to place and organize itself in matter. Remember, the whole movement to manifest is coming from something which is completely formless, spaceless, timeless. And as it moves to manifest, it has to cast out of itself space, time, space, and form. And so this transition is extremely important. How do you cast the sense of space and so many parts and distinctions from a consciousness which has itself no distinction, no separation, no parts, no directions? And this transition is what is being described here, and that's what makes it so profound and so compact. He says, for this spatial infinity takes advantage of the concentrations of the ether to more firmly to place and organize itself in matter. And these concentrations of ether are the stars. And I last time touched briefly on the physics of it, that there is this tremendous concentration which makes for the heat and light and creates all the elements. But if you look at the totality of the universe now from a gigantic vision of all those super galaxies made up of smaller galaxies, each made up of millions of solar systems, each of which has the sun in its center. What holds it all in space, in that infinity? If you look at the whole thing from the subtle side, it is a one gigantic movement of energy, whirling in an enormous space. And at best we can say the underlying base of that energy is this etheric movement. But what fixes it, what gives it a grounding, pins it down in all the movements, is this focal point of the sun. All the planets move around the sun. It's as if the sun drags with it the whole solar system. In the same way, in the galaxy, the whole cluster of all these solar systems are pinned down by the center of the galaxy, which is like a gigantic sun. And the super galaxies, which are themselves made of a large number of galaxies, millions of galaxies, are pinned by the sun, concentrations of the ether materializing themselves. So if you look at this totality of the whirling universe, everything would normally fly apart in chaos, but it is the center point of the galaxy, center point of the solar system, the sun, which pins, fixes, around which everything whirls. And it is this sun which also transitions from the gaseous, etheric reality and creates the denser materials, manufactures them, all the elements, and throws them out to form the planets continuously. So it's as if in that infinity there are special points of focus of the tapas, of the creative energy, and where those focal points have established themselves, they fix, they become the relative, the stability in the relativity, and there the generation takes place where, as Sri Aurobindo describes, in order to more firmly to place and organize itself in matter, and you see the materialization of matter. So the culmination is the sky is the stars, his bones, and the sky is the flesh of the body. But before this could happen, the rhythms of time unfolding in space are described. And it starts with this, having set the heaven, midworld and earth as the scope of the space. He goes through, regions are his flanks, lesser regions ribs, seasons his members, months and half months their joints, day and night are his standing place. So these all in sequence, you will find, capture how time organizes itself in rhythms in space. And remember, again, it's moving from something which is essentially timeless, spaceless, and now to form space and time. What is the rhythm that you can cast when you first move into space? You must have a relationship against which some rhythm comes. Where there is no direction, how can you speak of this in relation to that? So first the sense of direction is set. Now how is this set? And it's a very subtle, because profound, truth, that the directions are something which we have spontaneously. Now imagine you are in empty space, far away from any planet, any sun, any point of reference, as a tumbling consciousness, perhaps with body or without. When you look around, you only become aware of the universe around you. What is it that becomes your first reality? Where everything is in pure relativities. There's no up and down or no direction. What is your first reality? You have a sense of, if I ask, what do you see? All right, let's say we see a point of light. Where is it? In front of me. The first reality that we experience in relation to the universe is the sense of my front. And then, in relation to that, my back. And here's the interesting part. It doesn't stop with front and back and my sides. Now, even if you don't have a body, the sense of front, back and sides is there inherent. Where does it come from? It seems to exist even when all space is empty and no time is felt. You have a sense of a front, back and side. The sides form in relation to the front and back. And this is because, and that's what was captured in the first section of the verse, dawn is the head of the horse sacrificial. There's this whole movement to manifest, which creates the sense of direction and a front. In relation to the movement to manifest, there is a back. But these two being set, and they have already been set in a sense, there is automatically a side. And what does the side represent to us? The sides represent the sense of direction now fixed. Where the front and back are still abstract, moving into manifestation. Which direction? No direction. But the moment you have this movement to manifest and the back, and the side appears, the directions get settled, fixed. They may be relative to you. If I turn, my front turns. Doesn't matter. When we stand in the middle of the desert, and let's say now the sun has not yet risen, you still have the front, back, and the two sides. But as the sun rises, you turn to face it, that becomes east, your front, west, your back, north and south, your sides. It's relative to the sun, it's relative to the position of the earth, but there are these four. Where do they come from? They seem to be almost essential realities of the experience of space and time, because of the way this movement enters to manifest. It creates the concept of sides, front, back, and concept of sides. And as it creates that, because it is something so essential, consciousness moving to manifest, each of these is an aspect of consciousness, a power, a conscious being, one may say. And you will find, therefore, in all of the ancient traditions, they give names to these four directions. And in many of the traditions, they ascribe certain qualities and powers to each of them. The sun, for us standing on the earth, fixes the reference point. That's east, and therefore the other is north-south. You could go anywhere in space, you will have the sense of these four directions. We also have an up and down, but we don't treat it as a direction. We treat it more as gradations. Up means rising into the air region, going beyond into the sky region. Down means going into density of earth. And all of this has already been captured in heaven is his back, midworld his belly, earth is his footing. Having set the high to low in gradations, front and back have already been captured in the movement forward of dawn. The sides remain. The regions are his flanks. And here there is a fixity which comes as the four directions get fixed. So, the phrase Disha Parshve. The moment this is fixed, now we can have relationships in space. But once this is fixed, we find there are subtler gradations which appear. You have four, and then between the two, you have east and you have south and you have southeast, and it's as important for directions. If you froze yourself on four, there would not be the continuity in between. And so the sense of combinations of these four is brought in, and it is described as lesser regions, their ribs. So Disha Parshve, Avantara Disha Parshava. In between directions are the ribs. So when the horse stands, the two sides set the sense of direction, and the ribs are the fine gradations of their combinations. But notice the ribs have fixed steps. They are rigid, they hold, they are fixed. And so it's as if once the four directions are set in abstraction, in essence, there is a densification and a rigidification of in-betweens. So when, for example, you will see the weather report, they will speak of the wind, easterly wind, southerly wind, or they'll say southeast, and then they make finer gradations, east, southeast, or south, southeast, to make still finer distinctions. And these are like the ribs, the fine steps. But with that now, the directions can now flow in relationships. And once the directions are set, space, the rhythms of time can now begin to express themselves in those relationships. What happens next? The seasons his members. Ritavo Angani. Angani are literally the limbs. Now we are not speaking of the human limbs, but the horse limbs. And the horse limbs, you will see, depending on how you choose to describe it, you may say 4 legs, the body and the head. That's about all you can say. But the idea here is that there are large chunks which come in sequence. If you had to describe the horse as it is moving past the finishing line, you'll say first the head crosses, then the frontal legs, the body, and then the hind legs and the tail. So there's a sequence in which they follow each other, and the sequence repeats, because as eternity manifests in time, the sense of endlessness cannot be lost, because that is the deeper reality. But in order to fix it in narrow time, the endlessness represents itself by repetition. Whatever is expressed as limited time is as if cut out from the endlessness, but it is cut out, and the cutting out itself is endless. So there's the rhythm of repetition which appears. The endlessness of time now recedes, and the focus of consciousness shifts to the steps, and we start counting the steps. Year 1, year 2, year 3. To the human consciousness, we are counting the year, the month, the date. But the fact is, the year, month, date are carved out from where? An endless extension of time in which they repeat endlessly. The moment you fix a duration, let us say we go to Jupiter, and the year there is a much longer duration than the Earth year. The moment you fix that year duration, you have automatically a repetition. Any sequence you may take, let's say we have for whatever strange reason, we have a volcano which erupts regularly, and we make that our counter. The moment you count an interval, implied is the interval unendingly repeated. Because that's the reality, eternity, time as eternity. So the next step is catching this rhythm of time, and it begins with the seasons. And the seasons represent the cycles of unfolding. Now we may play with how many seasons, is it 4, is it 6, doesn't matter. But you will see the seasons here represent not merely the seasons of our weather changes. You may say spring, summer, dewy, autumn, winter, etc. It's not merely that. The seasons here represent more profoundly the mood of nature in unfolding. And what is the largest of those rhythms? The cycles of the yugas. If we look at the 4 yugas, they represent moods of nature in manifestation. There is the Satya Yuga, which represents an age when truth is living, vivid, intense, spontaneously expressed, effortless. The second period when the truth expressed now is moving so fast that the form cannot keep up and there is a gap. And we cling to the form by will. We force the truth by will to take on forms. But the truth keeps moving. And eventually, even the will breaks down, because the will is not elastic enough, strong enough. And it moves to a phase when the effort of will gives way to forming conventions. This is how it should be done. And there's an imposition by a collective convention. And most of our laws of society, what's good and bad, are cast during that period. And so we try to live by an idea of what's good and bad. We cannot feel the truth anymore. The truth has already receded. It's gone too far. And then eventually the gap is so great that the forms which we have created are hollow. The truth is no more living in them. It's escaped. And the forms are empty, and we break the form, and that becomes the 4th phase of Kali. When the form is broken, what happens? We look for the truth. Where is the truth? We find it again, and again we are in alignment with it, and there is the next golden age, Satya Yuga. But the truth keeps moving faster than the form can keep up, and again the second, and the third, and the fourth, and again the first. So the idea of the seasons here, in the largest cosmic sense, is this moods of nature, of the time. And time itself has a mood as it unfolds in manifestation, and gigantic moods which we cannot even remember in a human lifetime, too big for the human lifetime to register. We call them Manvantara, literally translated as interval of Manu. Who is Manu? He is the one who gives form, who casts out the form in which the mood is to be articulated. And each cycle has with it a presiding natural form native to that mood of time. So as we may say now, let's break away from this image to a more common image. As Kala, as divine, as the Lord, as Mahakala, moves to manifest himself through the rhythms of time, according to his mood, certain forms become naturally expressed. And the one who casts those forms, gives them to humanity, or manifests them and fixes them, is the Manu of that age. And so these are described as Manu Antara, intervals of Manus. But there are innumerable Manus. They are just embodiments of the divine expressing, forming his moods. And within those gigantic larger cycles are sub-cycles of the Mahayugas, and within that the 4 yugas, and within that so many years, within that so many seasons of the years. But you see again this idea of moods in large steps within that, finer steps of moods, always repeating within that finer steps of moods. So to the human experience, when we look bottom up, we do not see that those gigantic moods, they are not in our domain of experience, but the seasons are in our domain of experience. So the word used here to capture this sense of the cycles and the moods of time is the ritu. Ritavo angani. They are the limbs. But because we are looking bottom up, ritu for us means the seasons within the year. But keep in mind, since we have a larger vision always at the backdrop, we keep in mind the larger seasons of time, and we see the current cycle within the year as representative of those larger cycles. So the seasons, his members, angani, the limbs. And then now finer distinctions within that. Who sets the seasons? The sun. But we have also other cycles closer to us caused by the moon. And those are the months and half months set by the moon. So again, from the largest cosmic poise of the sun's rhythms, we move closer to sub-cycles of the moon's rhythms. The months and half months are their joints, the joints within the limb. So the limb is already set, but what allows the limb to act? What gives them flexibility in the rigidity? So no limb would be a meaningful, useful limb unless it could move to do what it's supposed to do. If you remove the bones completely, the limb would simply be limp. So you need the bones. But if it is one big bone for one limb, then the limb can do nothing. So you need joints to make for the movements. And it is the joints which make possible the kinesis, the dynamism, activity of the limb. So the limb itself being the season, it is the month and the half months which are the joints which activate the power of the season. Now I'm going to touch upon something here with a slight digression, which is a profound truth of how things actually happen in these lunar and solar cycles. The solar cycle sets the mood. The mood is set, but the mood now must be grounded and materialized in action. Who does that? That's the lunar cycle. So you will see in the Indian calendar system, we have a combination of both. But the dynamization, actualization is done by the moon cycle. Therefore, we wait for, in the sun cycle, we wait for the full moon or new moon for the activation. If you have to plant grain in the fields, it is the sun cycle which sets the season. So we are going to plant not in winter, we are going to plant as spring starts. The sun has shifted, the heat is now increasing, now is the time to plant. But when will you plant? The activation is by the moon, when the moon begins to grow. The moon symbolizes and influences the life energies in all living things, the life force. And so as the moon waxes, grows in brightness, the life energy increases. As the moon wanes, the light reduces, the life energy dulls. So if you want the seed to sprout with full vitality, you have to plant it when the moon is waxing. If you plant it when it is waning, the life force of the seed pushing forward, trying to intensify, will struggle against the natural rhythm, which is a weakening energy. And so it will still come through, but it will be weak. It will have been weakened by the universal rhythm, crushing its forward movement. So the activation is taking place with the moon. Now, we see this truth also in the way we interpret these rhythms astrologically, not only astronomically. In a chart, when we study, We may say, oh, you are in such and such a phase. That is the dasha, the cycle of the mood. But when will the dasha kick in? With a certain alignment of the moon. With a alignment when the moon is on a particular nakshatra or in a particular phase or at a particular transition, it kicks in at that point and the result is given. So it is the same idea. The joints here are what activate and give dynamic form to the mood of the season. So the months and the half months are their joints. The two cycles are important. The month is the cycle when the moon has completed one waning and waxing cycle. But each of these, whether waning or waxing, are complementary, and therefore they are specifically mentioned because they involve the rhythm of growth and subsiding of growth. In other words, increase of energy and then energy needing to rest. In a text like this, which is so dense, nothing is wasted, nothing is repetitive without cause. Every finest detail has a suggestion, and the suggestion here is that there is this rising and falling cycle. With the sun and the seasons, it's not so obvious, but with the moon, it's very obvious. The energies go through a process of increase, and at some point, there is an imbalance. And because of the excess of energy put out, the body tires. And at that point, the body has to stop, reduce the energy, and go into rest. And then once it is rested and refreshed, again the energy can flow out, activate, and then again go back to rest. In any dynamic expression, you need this double cycle. And that's why the specific mention of the month and the half month. Masascha ardha masascha parvani. And then after that cycle, the final smallest cycle, which also has the same double facet. The days and nights are his standing place. You see, in the highest cycles, there is not this idea of positive, negative. But the moment you've come to dynamism, activation, energy movement, with the moon, you have the positive, negative. And then in the material form of it, most dense material form, it is day and night, activity and rest of all creatures. There is no creature on earth which does not have to go through this cycle of activity and rest. But the smallest unit of our natural rhythm of time measurement is day and night are his standing place. We are here and now. Who is standing? The cosmic horse. But the cosmic horse is cosmic. Where is it standing? In the here and now. And this is a profound conclusion that it comes to in this whole passage. From that which was all time of eternity, all infinity of space, across the three worlds, so vast, so cosmic, it has through rhythm in space and time narrowed its focus to the here and now. The day and night are his standing place. Where is the horse located? Here and now. Where is here and now? Everywhere. But in the whole cosmic manifestation, there is a here and now as a cosmic reality. But it is still here and now in space and time. So again, we look back at the big picture. This giant energy moving to manifest as the galloping horse of the worlds. The point where its foot rests is the here and now. But its foot is not stuck in one place, it is moving rapidly forward. So the here and now is moving forward continuously. Now you can deal with this here and now concept on two levels. At a cosmic level, the whole universe, the divine himself, is moving forward continuously. Remember the line in Savitri, God shall grow up while the wise men talk and sleep. There's this whole movement of unfolding, growing up, And the divine himself is growing up in the manifestation. And the here and now at a cosmic level. And the other more accessible experience is for all things without exception, objects and creatures, there is a here and now. They may be different to their experience, but it exists. The concept of here and now exists for all things. For each one of us, here, now. For someone else, it is here, now, somewhere else. But still, there is a here and now. So the whole manifestation rests on the experience of here and now. If there was not the here and now, we could not have an embodiment, an individuality, and a sense of progress and our growth in manifestation. The soul, the self, although spaceless and timeless, rests on the other extreme in the personality, on the experience of here and now. Each here and now is like a ray, a point of that timeless, spaceless self. We can even describe it as a gateway, an entry point. If we were to focus intensely on this moment, now, here, you would experience in it the timelessness and spacelessness, or infinity and eternity, as the time and timeless, spaceless moves to manifest. Each moment and position is self-focusing narrowly, and therefore each moment and position is a gateway to recover the totality of self. It is this which is brought out in various spiritual practices and in traditions, where they say, don't live in the future, don't live in the past, live in the moment, in the present, wherever you are. But everyone can say, I'm already doing that. No, that's not the idea. The idea is that you enter the moment here and now so profoundly that you experience the self upholding that moment here and now. That is the true way to live. But the point is, in this whole cycle of space-time rhythms, that self has now been fixed in the here and now. And this is the standing place of the horse. And finally, the description completes with, the stars his bones and the sky is the flesh of his body, which we have already discussed. But the fixing of spirit in matter and forming the points in the canvas in which the permanence is established. So this is the second phase of the whole verse. In the Sanskrit, the verse goes like this: Ahoratrani pratishtha. The word for standing place is pratishtha, where established, where firm, the foundation, so to say. So the pratishtha is also used to describe image, form, but more generally foundation, establishment. You have heard this word pratishtan, such and such pratishtan, meaning foundation, fixing in form. That which was timeless, spaceless, free, unconditioned, has now managed to fix itself in form, in a foundation, and established. From this foundation now, the individual soul can experience an individual life, and all the individual souls and individual lives can experience a complex interaction of a collective life. Each individual now rises from this foundation to recover the spirit in its infinity and eternity, and eventually in its timeless, spaceless transcendence, and linking all that all the way to this here and now moment. And the totality of the collective similarly rises to embody that divine potential here and now in life, transforming life. What makes now this dynamic play possible is the description in the text in the third phase, where the food in the belly, the rivers as veins, and the lungs and liver as mountains, etc., will be taken up, which we will take up next time. So in the commentary of Sri Aurobindo, he completes this passage which we had read last time by putting it this way. Earth is the footing because matter, outward form, is the fundamental condition for the manifestation of life, mind, and all higher forces. If there was not this here and now in matter, there could be no manifestation. On matter we rest and have our firm stand. Out of matter we rise to our fulfillment in spirit. And this captures the whole movement of this second description. On matter we rest and have our firm stand. Out of matter we rise to our fulfillment in spirit. And he begins the description of the next section. I just read the first line because it links with what we have discussed. Then once again, after these higher and more remote suggestions, we are reminded that it is some force manifesting in matter which the horse symbolizes. The material manifestation constitutes the essence of its symbolism. The images used are of an almost gross materiality. Some of them are at the same time of striking interest to the practical student of yoga, for he recognizes in them allusions to certain obscure but exceedingly common yogic phenomena. So this will be the passage which we take up next in the verse, where you will see very hard, even as he says, gross material symbols, and yet each of those suggests a profound yogic principle or experience. And we will take this up next Sunday. For now we can simply meditate on the verse, reading a few lines. Ushava ashvasya medhyasya shirah suryash chakshur vata prano vyattam agnir vaishvanarah samvatsara atmascha ashvasya medhyasya dyauha prishtham antariksham udaram prithivi pajasyam disha parshve avantara disha parshava ritavo angani masanscha ardhamasanscha purvani ahoratrani pratishtha. Om. Dawn is the head of the horse sacrificial. The sun is his eye. His breath is the wind. His wide open mouth is fire, the master might universal. Time is the self of the horse sacrificial. Heaven is his back and the midworld his belly. Earth is his footing. The regions are his flanks and the lesser regions their ribs. The seasons his members. The months and the half months are their joints. The days and nights are his standing place. The stars his bones, and the sky is the flesh of his body.